It's time for chapter 7 from the Green Ember, and it's called Fateful Decisions. This is the end. She was pounding the ground, hurtling toward Evergreen Row in the snarling, sickening smiles of the waiting wolves. At their head somehow stood the awful captain with that single red eye. He'd outsmarted and outmaneuvered her. How could she have thought she might escape? She made a decision. She did not slow down. Heather sped toward them, hoping to plow into Red-Eye with one powerful leap and kick. Rabbits were capable of great force when they struck with their legs at high speed. She had never done it, of course, but she was not about to quit. She was seconds away from that gang of wolves. They crowded around the trunk of the first pine, panting, their tongues dripping saliva. As she hurried their way, some tensed and took a few steps back, but Red-Eye advanced. He stood in front of his soldiers at the edge of the first great evergreen beneath the drooping branches. The rows of green pines stretched back behind them, nearly all the way to 7 Mounds. Heather prayed that Pickett was safe. There was nothing else she could do for him right now. The last few yards and a final burst of speed, that single red eye, it became a target and she a hurtling arrow. He barked for the wolves to spread out, cut off the possibility of her darting sideways in an attempt to escape. They obeyed at once, fanning out in a wide arc behind Red-Eye, extending like a mouth ready to snap closed on her. She readied herself to launch at him, noticing at the last moment the low branches of the pine above that snarling face of her enemy. She coiled in stride, her powerful legs ready to propel her forward at even greater speed. The wolves at the flanks closed in on her, but Red-Eye stood firm. He rose to his full height and drew a spear from where it lay hidden behind him. Too late! She launched. Pickett reached 7 Mounds with some difficulty. He had done his best to calculate his quickest route while accounting for the need to go back and forth as often as possible. As he fled, he'd been tortured by the conflict in his mind. Should I go back? He had slowed a few times, but always remembered Heather's charge. Don't look back. He didn't know what to do. What would Father say? What would King Jupiter have done? Finally, he decided, for the moment at least, that he would do what Heather asked and trust to her plan. 7 Mounds came into view, an odd, almost natural-looking series of large hills that ran all 7 in a row. Running hard, he crossed between the rise that separated the second and third hill and sprinted into the small clearing he and Heather knew so well. He removed the broken limbs and brush that disguised the little cave-like opening. He looked from side to side, afraid and confused. He slid roughly inside the opening. All was dark. He closed his eyes and sank down onto the cold, damp floor. Opening his eyes, he looked around the cave. His eyes had adjusted to the dimness, and the little opening let in a glowing seam of light. The room was small, with a big ceiling. It could hold maybe 5 or 6 more rabbits his size. He heard a little trickle, like a small stream. As his eyes grew more and more accustomed to the dark, he noticed what looked like a little crack in the rock at the back of the cave wall. There was no light coming through it. He crossed back to the entrance and peered out, fear and guilt gnawing at him. He hung his head. He didn't know what to do. He felt like he was responsible for all that had happened. It was his fault that the wolves had found them. Don't look back, Heather had said. Was that because she knew if he did, he would see her? What? What did she not want him to see? It didn't take much imagination to know. She had given herself up just to save him. He was alive because of his sister. Despair mingled with gratitude inside him. Guilt rose in his throat like a gag, and he slumped to the ground, beating the rock floor of the cave. His father had tried to teach him courage, had told countless tales of brave rabbits who sacrificed and did brave deeds for those they loved. He knew of Whitsun Mariner, Captain Blackstar, and though only a beginning, the tale of King Jupiter Goodson. He was supposed to be like those real heroes who had gone before. He was supposed to protect his sister, to never leave her. He was supposed to protect baby Jax. He should have run into the danger and done all he could to rescue Jax, no matter the cost. He'd promised. Instead, he was a cowering, crying rabbit staying safely in a cave. Heather had been the one who'd acted like a hero. Heather, his only sister and dearest friend in the whole world. Will I ever see her again? Will I ever see Jack? He rose and looked out the cave entrance. He peered down the flat stretch of ground, running a short distance from the mound to the thick trees. The trees were heavy on both sides of the short clearing, and Pickett imagined wolves and hawks waiting inside them to strike him dead the moment he left the cave. It was like a tunnel, the limbs and leaves forming the top, with the roots of the trees curving back toward the path. Trying to ignore the terrors lurking on either side of the thick brush, he set his gaze on the trees beyond. That way led to Heather, to Jack's and their parents, if any of them were still alive. And that's the end of chapter 7.